Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Roswell, New Mexico. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, the big thing is it's a race against time because the team has to figure out the science of like severing these links between Max and Jones before he does, because obviously it's what he wants, but he wants to be able to do it while he's still in Max's body, so that he's stuck in that body because obviously his own body is deteriorating. So it's like about saving Max's life while also ending Jones, which would not only save all their lives from being killed by Jones, but also save a planet where he is the dictator that he is. Because also if he does figure out the science, he will always be able to make more clones, so they have to stop him here and now. Obviously he's been able to get some of the science filled out, but I figured it's much. It's like he didn't get a look at enough of it in the Mindscape last episode, so like he's only got a fragment of it. He's trying to piece it together, but Liz and them are trying to figure it out first. But Liz needs to kind of create the science first necessary to do all this. So it is a complicated thing of like, right, to save Max's life would involve having to go back to Heath, because Heath is the one who helped her figure things out. I mean, granted, she had her all the science and stuff she had hidden away from Generex is in LA. So, but it would also mean walking down the path of like going to Heath, because Heath's the one that kind of basically gave her the ideas necessary to get this, the spores that she thought were gone. His outside of the box thinking is what led to that. So it is a complicated thing of Isabel pointing out, like, right, meaning having to, like, Max already doesn't like the whole science and aliens mixing situation, and then you add on top of that, there's a complicated love rivalry thing that's kind of going on too. And I love that Max walks in and says, "Oh, sorry guys, I'm late. Like, so what did I miss about the part about saving my lives and stuff like that?" It's like, perfect timing. Did you miss like all those other parts of the conversation? But yeah, like I said, everyone's got their own part to play in all of this. Alex is working on the machine, the Lockhart machine, and Michael's obviously worried about him because it's like, right, we know that it causes hallucinations and stuff like that. You're working on it for long periods of time. But Alex did leave out the fact is that everyone that has worked on it for long periods of time actually went really crazy in a very harmful way, not just seeing stuff, that there are major ramifications from him. Now, the question really is, like, had Alex been working on it more than 15 minutes at a time? Because even Michael was like, I know you're the type of person that will pull all-nighter, so make sure you're taking breaks. So he kept saying, like, 15 minutes, but the either because, like, even though he was working on it in short bursts, but it's like, because the way the episode plays out makes it seem like Alex wasn't, even though but maybe he was just making that point, like, oh, I'm going to take a short break. Because it's like, every 6 hours he's working on it, like 15 minutes or something like that, in 15-minute increments. But maybe that was enough exposure to the machine to, still do the damage. But it is fascinating that his mind would, because at first he's like, oh, I found like some like projector type of thing, because he thought it was projecting Nora. It's like, nope, she's his subconscious manifested, like the dilute. Like it is interesting that his mind would choose to manifest as Nora, and it's like, well, what is that supposed to be? Because like they're deep seated, family connections between the Mains as well as like Nora's family, of just like how deep that line goes. I mean, to be fair, like not all the Main stuff was bad. I mean, yes, your dad, everything had its issues, and your dad's dad, but Trip wasn't bad. I mean, him and Nora fell in love, so he was there trying to support her. So it's not like the Main's legacy is mainly bad, but that, you're not just the only exception to it. Like Trip was an exception as well, so like, it makes it a little less. I feel like the Main's blood. I mean, especially because it's like, it's not even just him. And like, I mean, granted, there is a complicated thing of like, right, one of his brothers kind of was kind of just like their dad. But then, like, Gregory isn't like their dad either. So, like, I think it shows that the Main's bloodline isn't as, like, tainted as I think Alex would kind of think. Understandably why, though, because it's been, like, a long, like, it's just one generation of hate led to another generation of hate. But you and your brother, at least one of your brothers, broke that trend, But it is interesting because Nora inside of his mind is basically like, you're not telling Michael like all this because you're trying, because you basically, it's like the Lockhart machine is a literal metaphor for him trying to like untangle the past and correct the past on his own between him and Michael, because it's like, because destiny and everything says that they shouldn't be together just because of like their family's history, but he wants to kind of change that because he tried every step of the way to try. He even like in his mind, like saying like the past year he's been trying to undo all the terrible stuff that his father's ever done. So, but Nora was kind of saying like, your love will, it's you're kind of worried about this undoing your love, but your love will kind of be your undoing in this, because he is so fixated on it, and he ends up finding out like in his hallucinations and stuff like that his father did implant a device. So it's like even now beyond the grave, his father still is kind of screwing things up and complicated things, you know, especially at a worst time, considering like Alex and Michael, it's like, yeah, like our first actual like out in the hanging like an actual date, because it's like when you think about it, it's like, right, they've been so on and off and things have been complicated, they've never actually been on an actual date. They've just never been just there's been things there, but there's always been a wrench thrown in their relationship. So they've never actually had like a defining relationship. It's never, they've just been like, oh, hand in hand type of thing. So I thought that was kind of fascinating to think about. But Alex basically hacked into the cameras to make it seem like he was taking a break, that he locked the machine up. But it's like, no, he went missing for 2 days. Michael figured as much, because the moment Michael showed up, it's like, the food I ordered for him, he never got it. So he knew exactly what Alex had done. So he showed up there, even being like with the t-shirt and everything, to get Eduardo's attention. So it's like, I could legally lock you up. It's kind of like, yeah, let's kind of move past like the awkward dance of just kind of like, you know, aliens showing up at your like secret facility and stuff like that. But luckily they were able to get to Alex. I was like, is that actually like, because I didn't know like how much is real and how much wasn't. Like when he's on the edge, I'm like, is he actually there, or is he actually somewhere else? It's like, no, he actually is in a facility, which even he was like, yeah, it's metaphorical because you're in like a rocky area. And it's like, yeah, like everything related to this is kind of, you know, a very complicated and rocky road, you know? And so him and Michael were able to work together. Like Michael was able to use it because he's like, yeah, it's like his own piece of the ship and everything, where it's like, or a piece of the console where it's like, it wants to be put together. So he was able to, you know, he's always been good at breaking stuff. So he pulls the machine's insides apart, and they find the device that Jesse had implanted. So they cut it and then put everything back. So where we go beyond that, we'll have to wait and see. But other than that, kind of in that deep sky related avenue, we kind of get our first like real like conversations between Eduardo and Kyle. And it's about, because Eduardo blames himself for Kyle's dad's death, because he's like, right, because of me, your dad was working as a double agent to go up against Jesse. And obviously Jesse found out about him and put him in a cell with an alien that ultimately ended up killing him. So he blames himself, because it's like, right, we had this bottle for all these different accomplishments and stuff like that, which Kyle was like, you can't blame yourself for what happened to my dad. Like, what Jesse Maines did, that's not on you. My dad made his choices. But for Eduardo, that's it. Like, Eduardo knows, like, your dad wanted you nowhere near this. Like, obviously you're following that same code that your father did, which is admirable, but that led him down the path of destruction, because it's like, he became so obsessed with like helping aliens that his personal life suffered, which we see that that's kind of what's happening with Kyle. Like, Kyle's personal life has, you know, but it's that, and it's something that each one of them, all of them, Liz in particular, Max to a certain extent, Isabel as well, like having to, like, you know, because I think it's interesting, because like while that's kind of happening in Kyle's life about like the whole like, oh, separating like the alien stuff from like your personal life, not letting it consume you, like Maria's story is kind of a prime example of how you kind of go about that to a certain extent. But it's also interesting because like Michael and Alex's whole thing was like, right, I figured like the best first date is us solving like a 75-year-old mystery. So it's like they kind of like I mean, I guess because like the relationship is kind of born from like their family histories, like because even Michael's like our family, our not family, but our situation will always involve aliens. There's no like getting away from that. Like your family's history is tied to aliens, mine is because I actually am an alien. So it's like there's always going to be that. But once again, I guess it's just a conversation of making it just not be all consuming, and so. But Kyle was talking to his uncle. Was like, I get it, like why you're worried about me and everything, and I appreciate that. But he's like, I'm gonna walk my father's path, not because of some like obligation. It's like this is what I want to do. Like this is something I want to do with my life because the people that he cares about most in his world are mixed up in this. You know, this connects to all the people he cares about. So it's like walking away from this life would mean walking away from them, and he would never do that. So. But I'm gonna walk that path, I'm gonna walk my dad's path, but better. What my dad couldn't do, like, because to be fair, he kind of handled a lot of this alone, and I think Kyle's luckily, well, for one, he's not the only human involved in this. There are plenty of humans. He's got Alex, he's got Liz, he's got, I was about to say Maria, but I mean, she's, an alien or part alien or so, but you get what I'm trying to say, like, but he isn't alone. Like I feel like his dad kind of was in this. Like they're all in this together. So I think that like alleviates some of that burden that Kyle would bear. I even burden that he would kind of carry. But I also appreciate he calls him like Tia, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. Because it's like, yeah, we are family. It's like, yeah, here's a family member you never really got to know, but also knowing that he's got your back and he's worried about you. So there's that side of things. Then we have Maria and Gregory getting close, but Isabel playing third wheel and kind of interrupting things because Maria's just trying to live life now. I mean, almost dying puts things in perspective for you. But I think that's the interesting pairing of Isabel, who's doing that. Who's all about like, no, we gotta find Jones, we gotta stop him, we gotta save Max's life. Like she's all about the mission. Where like as they're investigating stuff, Maria and Gregory are slipping in little moments here and there. I even thought it was really sweet where Maria was like, I actually wanted a sister for so long, and me and Isabel kind of had a sister fight. I mean, granted, it's a lot more complicated considering like, yeah, you're her like great granny's type of situation, but it's also like, honestly, yeah. They are like sisters, and I think that's such a cute thing that they have like bonded the way they have. Like this is easily turning into one of my favorite like relationships. Like it's actually really cute. Like the way like later on, like after her and Gregory do the thing, there's a whole conversation about eggs, and it's just like she made some fun and just like and it, like them gossiping like almost like sisters. Like I love that their relationship has developed into what it is. It's so dope. I constantly love that bit too of like, yeah, I'm taking mines to go, mains, and then she like telekinesis like the alcohol or even the coffee out of his hands. Because while they're looking into like are there any other aliens that might be hidden out, and luckily they end up finding, because like whoever it was most likely was like Michael, her, and Max not being able to speak. But then like they look into some records and find out someone named Johnny Doe. Beyond that, he had like a best friend named Buckskin. They went to like this kind of like Christian camp and stuff like that. They even found this particular alien's pod in the water that was like frozen over. So it's like, okay, because Gregory was like, yeah, our dad Jesse like had like ingrained in us like the crash of 47, like knowing exactly like the trajectory of which everything kind of fell. So this fit the path of it, all that. But yeah, my whole point was with that being the main crux of that, you also have the situation of like Maria trying to get Isabel to live her life. It's like, oh, what about you? An announcer. It's like, oh, like, yeah, like we were drinking a little bit, but then like obviously she got a little too nervous because it's like, well, for one, she investigates lies and stuff like that, so the last type of person you want near you. I'm surprised this doesn't come up. I was like, also, I'm sure it'd be a little weird. I mean, I guess it's like why get too caught up in it, but it's still got to be a little weird because it's like, well, Max and her had a one night stands. And I'd assume, I mean, not unless she doesn't know that. I'd assume she does, but I'm like, I guess it's like, well, you gotta let that slide, but it's still just got, I don't know. That just, me personally, I'm like, that'd be weird. I don't know. I guess, like, why get so caught up in it? But it just, I feel like that'd be so weird. I mean, I guess if you want to get weird about it too, it's like there's a certain aspect of things I'm like, because I was about to say, you can make it really weird by thinking about certain things, because it's like, well, Maria, well, because that also depends on how things played out during, because we don't know the ins and outs of it, but like, let's not forget, like, Maria, Michael, and Alex had a threesome last season, and it's like, well, you're dating his brother now, like, you know what I mean? Like, you think about things too much, you're like, oh, that's a little weird, isn't it? And it's like, just shut up and just accept things. It's like, oh, like, things are fine and great, like, why are you, I don't know, it's just funny to think about, like, oh, those are just kind of like some interesting dynamics, because I'm like, considering like previous things, I'm like, would that really, I don't know, just awkward to think about. Maybe they're aware of it, maybe they're thinking about it, maybe they're not, whatever the case may be. But Isabel is taking, Maria's advice about just kind of like living life, could try and figure out what she is that she wants, because it's like, right, being about the mission and everything, it's fine, but find out what you're fighting for. Like, you're fighting for like all the people you care about, yes, but it's also like you have to find something beyond that, because like when the fight's over, like, you want something to kind of return to with all of this, not just the people you love, but also just like a life. Like, what do you want beyond this? So that's interesting, and ultimately, it kind of ties in neatly. We'll get to it because everything kind of wraps together at the end. But let's shift over to Liz and Max's side of things, which they're on a road trip to go get her stuff from Generex. And I love, like, while he's fixing the tire and stuff like that. It's like, and they're talking about, like, right, the road trip he wanted to go on, like, their senior year and stuff like that. She's like, oh, like, talking about the different songs he had for different occasions. She's like, wait, like, trying to woo me or whatever, like, set the mood. Like, did you have a track for that? And he does the same thing. She's like, you did, didn't you? And it's like, yeah, he did. So, but Max does say that he wants to try and make sure, like, their past complications, like, he doesn't want to make the same mistakes, because he ends up talking about it. He wants, like, he wants to help Isabel find happiness. He wants to make sure Michael, but he also wants to kind of repair things with, like, he wants her to be, like, happy as well. He wants to, make things as good as possible for her. Because he talks about the fact is, like, yeah, you thought, like, when I destroyed your lab and then burned it down, I kept some of your tapes. And she's like, obviously, it's like, those tapes are, like, you could have told me, but you never did. And it's like, he's like, yeah, but that's what I'm telling you now. I'm trying to make up for the past. I don't want to, like, hide anything from you. But it's like, he listened to those tapes all the time. And it's like, I know how important they are to you. So, trying to, like, go into next, because he's trying to figure out, like, what's next for him and Liz. So, but they ultimately go back to her place, and it comes down to the situation of obviously him asking a whole bunch of questions about, oh, did you enjoy your life here? And for her, it's like, this life here was like a commercial life. It was kind of like that commercial, and just that quick, perfect thing of, like, wasn't 100% real, but it was like, no, it was kind of a commercial of, like, the life I kind of would want, but it wasn't like, it was more so like kind of rather than it being like her embracing the life, it was just more so a life away from Roswell. She's like, my reasons for leaving Roswell obviously were complicated at the time, and even asking, like, oh, was Heath a good guy and stuff like that, which is still that awkward thing of, like, right, even Heath kind of fell into that same category of, like, that commercial life. But obviously, it turns out he had actually quit Generex sometime after she did, and he goes and looks, and it turns out, like, wait, these spores, my stuff, they're gone, which is like, did Generex find them? But I'm like, the only person who would know is Heath. And then, like, obviously Liz is kind of like, oh, he must have, like, he must be hiding them from him, but Max is kind of like, do you really know this Heath guy? And she's like, really? And it's kind of back to, like, right, it's one step forward, two steps back type of thing of just her just being like, right, like, you burned down my lab and everything, and now you're kind of, he's, like, trying to justify it by being like, I'm not saying, like, you made a mistake. I'm just saying, like, in your need to find, like, a partner after I hurt you the way I did, like, maybe you were just a little blinded when it came to Heath, because it's like, how much does she really know? I mean, at the end of the day, like, she should have also been asking a question like, how much did Heath actually know about you? It's like, you hid a lot from Heath, so, you know, people have a tendency to hide a lot anyway, so. But then, like, later on when they're breaking into Heath's place and everything, and they do find the spores, and because initially it's like, oh, here's some brain scans, and it was like, oh, he said it was for his grandma. At first, or like his mother who had Alzheimer's, I was wondering, like, oh, we're going to find out, like, Heath's actually trying to cure himself. That, like, I thought, like, maybe that's what that was all about. I didn't expect the interesting twist we got, where just, like, everything kind of got thrown at us at once. Because eventually looking through some of the notes and hearing it, Max, like, ends up finishing some of, like, what she's saying. She's like, and Liz is like, how do you know all that? He's like, oh, yeah, like, I listen to the tapes all the time because it was my way of staying close to you. But then it turns out, wait, like, these are exactly in Heath's notes. So that means not only did he steal the spores, you were right. He ended up stealing the tapes from your house. And it's just like, ugh. It's like that. She's like, damn, that sucks. But then in actuality, it's really fascinating. That, like, obviously looking into all of this, like, the same time, Isabel's investigation with Ananta led to her running into Dallas. And I was like, wait, what? Because they don't know about the connection to Rosa, which I'm like, he couldn't have known that Rosa was, like, her circumstances. So it's like, universe is a funny way of doing things. Like, they just happen to cross paths, and, you know, it's, like, interesting. Because it turns out he's actually JD, and his friend Buckskin is Heath. So everything Heath's been doing is him trying to heal his friend, his best friend. I'm like, so that means, like, he on some level, either he didn't realize, either he knew, like, what Liz was up to secretly, and he was just hoping she would confide in him, or he didn't know. He just thought, like, oh, this stuff that she's doing, at the very least, I could use it to help JD. So, like, maybe that's what that came from, is, or Dallas. I don't know. It makes you wonder. That's definitely going to be interesting. Granted, there's a wrench in the conversation as, well, it benefits to look and sound like Max when Jones is able to use it to his benefit to hunt down Heath, who's actually still been in New Mexico trying to, like, figure this whole thing out. So it's like, right, like, you know, I'm not Max Evans, and he takes the phone from him, and it's like, wait, in that moment realizing he's an alien, but it's like, around these parts they call me Jones. So that's not good, but he's going to keep Heath alive long enough because Heath can help fill in the gaps of that science. So there's that, but there's the downside of, like, the moment Heath stops being useful, he'll kill Heath. So Heath's going to need to drag that along, or at least try to. But also, it's like the moment Jones gets what he wants, he's going to kill him as well. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Because I also skipped over it too. The person who ended up drugging Kyle with that paralytic. It's just like basically he had an adverse reaction. I don't think that's what Heath was kind of expecting. But it's like, right, like, it was all for the purpose of trying to help his best friend. And like, once again, we're all kind of on the same side to a certain extent, but quite the revelation, like, that all three of those stories kind of ended up coinciding with each other. So, but technically all four, because now Jones has them and everything. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.